Welcome to EPG Pathshala. Subject is Indian culture. Our course is Museology, and today's module is Museum Security Problems and Treasure Trove and other legislative acts in India. I am Dr. Indrani Bhattacharya from Department of Museology, University of Calcutta, West Bengal. The learning objectives of these modules are the values and ideas for protection of the cultural and natural heritage of a nation from deterioration. The various legislative acts of India regarding the protection of cultural and natural heritage artifacts and monuments, museum security and the protection of heritage artifacts. There are also constitutional provisions and provisions through legislations. Museum security has multi-dimensional meaning. It has many values and ideas which are very important for protection of our natural and cultural heritage from deterioration. Proper preservation and conservation of the material and the cultural artifacts of any culture and civilization is a vital part of any museum security. At times, general administrative personnel and the curatorial staff of a museum pay little attention to its security system. But nowadays, the legal instruments are very important in running each and every museum in India. Probably, this sort of attitude can be attributed to the ignorance of those museum personnel. The security agency have no coordination with the museum administration in a majority of Indian museums. Most of the major museums of India, the security are mainly run by the State Police Department or CISF or private security agency. In some of the museums like National Museum New Delhi, 2 or 3 security agency runs the total security system with overlapping duties. In the middle of the 20th century, the government of India has taken steps in adopting different policies for safeguarding the cultural and natural heritage of our country. India has rich cultural and natural heritage, and in this regard, the preservation of historical structure has to have an objective of safeguarding national cultural identity. Various policies and laws are also framed out for the preservation of all these historical structures. It shall be the obligation of the state to protect every monument or place declared by or under law made by the Indian Parliament. It is also essential to be aware of the international conventions and the national with the respective state laws significant to the security and protection and conservation of the art and the cultural heritage of a nation. The legislative acts in India regarding museum security are mainly Bengal Regulation 19 of 1810, the Madras Regulation 7 of 1817, the Act 20 of 1863, the Trove Act 1878, the Ancient Monument Preservation Act 1904, the Antiquities Export Control Act 1947, the Ancient Monuments and Archaeological Sites Remains Act 1958, the Ancient Monuments and Archaeological Site Remains Rule 1959, the Antiquities and Art Treasure Act 1972, the Antiquities and Art Treasures Rules 1973, both of these act jointly, and the Wildlife Protection Act 1972. The policy decisions are taken by the government authorities to political and diplomatic necessities and the very rigidly structured legal instruments. And the government of India has this regulation as at its disposal. Now we discuss about the Bengal regulation of 1810 and the Madras regulation of 1870. The main emphasis is given to the cultural renaissance of early 19th century, witnessed enactment of the first ever equestrian legislation in India, and this is known as Bengal Regulation 19 of 1810. This was soon followed by another regulation which is renowned as Madras Regulation 7 of 1817. This regulation vested our government with the power to intervene whenever the public holdings were under threat of misuse, and to restrict this misuse, this regulation were enacted rigidly. However, both these acts were silent on the buildings under the private ownership. These are only applicable to the government properties. The Act 20 of 1863, this act was enacted to empower the government to prevent injury to and preserve buildings remarkable for their antiquity or for their historical or architectural values. And all of these acts soon helps the Indian government to preserve its monuments properly, which will be discussed in the later models. Now we come to the Indian Treasure Trove Act 1878. It was promulgated to protect and preserve treasure which was found accidentally but had the archaeological and historical value. The act was enacted to protect and preserve such treasures and their lawful disposal. This act deals with treasure, which means anything of any value hidden in the soil or in anything of fixed thereto. Whoever at any time find any such treasure which is more than 10 rupees, he should immediately inform government in written regarding such treasure is found and has to mention nearby value of that treasure. After this, the collector may publish notice to all claimants in relation to treasure found and would mention its near value and location where it is found. After 6 months, this period of claim starts after the publication is met. Collector will, even with special writing, give notice to the person who lastly hold treasure. This act was enacted in 1904 and known as the Ancient Monuments Preservation Act. The Ancient Monuments and Preservation Act was enacted with an objective to preserve and protect the historical monuments and the ancient articles of historical, creative, or archaeological interest. The legislation further aims to exercise government over traffic in archaeological findings, prevent excess digging in certain cases, because in some areas excessive digging is very dangerous to the life expectancy of the monuments, and so it is very important for the preservation and the attainment of historic monuments. This act also defines ancient monuments as any erection, construction, or monument, any tumulus or area of interment, and includes any cave, rock, statue, writings, etc. that are historically important. This also consists of the site of historical monument, the piece of land that is adjacent to the site where ancient sculpture is situated for the purpose of fencing such area, and the convenient supervision of the monument. These sculptures should also be preserved under this act. The Act further explains the meaning of antiquities as any object that can be moved and due to the ancient or historical association necessary to protect against injury, removal, and dispersion. It is very important from the point of view of export of antiquities, and an act was passed in 1947 which is known as Antiquities Export Control Act. This is passed to prevent the export of antiquities and art objects. The Government of India enacted this act. Any article, object, or thing illustrative of art, science, craft, literature, religion, costumes, morals, or policies in bygone ages, or articles or anything declared by the central government by notification in the official gazette to the antiquity for the purpose of this act, which has been in existence for not less than 100 years, would be prevented from export. It is also provided that regulation over the export of antiquities under a license issued by the Director General of Archaeological Survey of India, empowering him to decide whether any article, object, or thing is or is not an antiquity for the purpose of the act, and his decision would be final. The ancient monuments and archaeological sites remains act. The ancient monuments and archaeological sites remains act enacted on August 28 of 1958. It is mainly for the purpose of the preservation of ancient monuments and archaeological sites of national importance. The Act provides regulation of archaeological excavations and protection of sculptures, carvings, and other similar objects. The central government will have the power to declare ancient monuments or archaeological sites, etc., to be of national importance, and as such, after the enactment of this act, many monuments was declared by the central government as a property of national importance. The Director General of Archaeological Survey of India may, with the sanction of the central government, declare these monuments as a property of national importance. The central government may also enter into a written agreement with the owner of any protected monument for its maintenance and preservation. In addition, the central government may impose restriction on proprietary rights in protected areas or may acquire a protected area for public purposes. This Act further provides for granting of licenses for excavation activities in protected areas, powers of the central government to control the movement of antiquities, compulsory acquisition of antiquities for their preservation, and compensation for loss or damage of land, penalties, etc. All these are included in this Act. Accordingly, in 1959, this rules was passed, which is known as the Ancient Monuments and Archaeological Site Remains Rules. The Ancient Monuments and Archaeological Sites and Remains Rules were framed in 1959. The Ancient Monuments and Archaeological Sites and Remains Act, along with the rules, came into force with effect from October 15, 1959. This Act repealed the Ancient and Historical Monuments and Archaeological Sites and Remains Declaration of the National Importance Act, 1951. In 1972, we see the Antiquities and Art Treasure Act, and the objective of this act is to control the export business in the treasures of antiquities and sculptures to avoid smuggling and fraudulent commercial activities of the antiquities. To necessarily acquire antiquities and sculpture for conservation and for other issues related with the object. Antiquities market is a very highly profitable business in the world. To restrict the business in antiquities, this act was mainly enacted by the government of India. This act defines the term antiquities as any sculpture, coin, epigraphy of images or other crafts and art or piece of writing, things or articles separated from caves or structures or the articles, things, etc., which represent science, expertise, literature, tradition, religion, political affairs from the olden ages. It further includes articles of things of historical importance, the objects affirmed by the central government as antique, which is in subsistence for 100 or more years, and any scripts or documents of historical or scientific value which subsisted for 75 years and more. An art treasure, according to the Act, means the work which are not antiquity and acknowledged by the central government by publicizing in the Gazette, considering their creative and aesthetic importance. Here, the aesthetic value of the object is noted very strictly. The Act makes it unlawful except the central government or the authorized person to export the objects that are historic or art treasure. The central government or authorized person shall export the antiquity only as per the stipulation and terms of permit provided by the prescribed authority. The export of the antiquity shall be guided by the Customs Act of 1962, which prohibits such export of antiquities. This act is mainly related to the wildlife of India and is known as Wildlife Protection Act. The first comprehensive legislative act relating to the protection of wildlife was passed by the Parliament, and it was ascended by the President on 9th September 1972. Wildlife Protection Act of 1972 extends to the whole of India except the state of Jammu and Kashmir. It provides for the protection of listed species of flora and fauna. This act empowers central and state government to declare any area a wildlife sanctuary or national park. The main objectives are to control poaching and illegal trading of wildlife in the country, providing a powerful legal framework for conserving the wildlife by introduction of regulations such as prohibition of hunting, protection and management of the habitat, establishment of protected areas, regulations and control of trade in parts and products derived from wildlife, and management of zoos, etc. In this module, we will discuss mostly the main acts which is enacted for the Indian museums, monuments and mosques, tombs, historical buildings, archaeological sites, and also to protect the natural heritages, mainly the flora and fauna. But one should remember that Act is an instrument, but the main point is the implementation procedure, and the total implementation procedure depends on the authorities, and it is the main point that for the strong implementation of this act, our government and the associated organization and institution should take proper step for the proper implementation of all these legal instruments. In the recent past, we have seen that the stolen Nobel Prize from Rabindra Bhavan Shantiniketan or Sharnath Buddha head from Indian Museum, Kolkata, is in the headlines of the media. In that cases, the total security system of a museum is totally failed. To trace the main weak point of the security problems in Indian museums, monuments, and other areas should be chalked out properly and proper steps should be taken. Museum security mainly focuses on the importance of the safe custody of antiquities or artworks or collection in pristine condition by all means rather than only safeguarding them from theft and vandalism. And our Indian Constitution has several provisions towards conserving archaeological inheritance and also provides for punishment following negligence and destruction of natural and cultural heritage of our country. This present write-up discusses all these constitutional provisions for maintenance and protection of natural and cultural heritage of India. All this legislative framework provided to the Indian museums might sound quite convincingly. Undoubtedly, the museums do have serious responsibility towards safeguarding the collections, which is supposedly under their custody, but they are not the authorities for taking corrective or remedial measures by imposing legal means themselves. After any unfortunate incident happened recently, which have been occurred in the Indian Museum, Kolkata, that is the stolen Sharnath Buddha head or a Nobel Prize of Rabindranath Tagore was from Rabindra Bhavan Museum, Shantiniketan. Recent some mishaps occurred readily help us to think over it. Quite obviously, museums have greater responsibilities towards making the people aware of the laws regarding the security of objects of heritage, besides the regular job of collection, care, and communication. But here I should mention that India has very remarkable monuments and historical sites like Taj Mahal, Agra Fort, Qutub Minar, Lal Killa, etc., which were visited by millions of people every day. And it is also our duty to give safety and security to all of these visitors. Not only the implementation of the legislation, but proper guarding and proper safety of these visitors along with this historical monuments, sites, etc., is inevitable in the present day world. At the end, I should suggest that the student should go through the web pages which the link which are given in the at the end of this module and the references which are to be consulted when they need it. Do you know, column will give them the main points to discuss in this module, and glossary will also help them to prepare about the acts and regulation related to safety and security of the Indian museum, monuments, historical buildings, etc. properly for a student. And at last, one student can go through the multiple choice questions for the final preparation of this portion of study. Thank you.